Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 90. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Nation. Dave, the final game, the NFL's 2024-2025 season is in the books. Super Bowl 59, LIX, taking place last night in New Orleans, and it was a blowout. I don't know how many people expected it to that degree, as the Eagles just stomped the Chiefs 40-22, and the final score does not do it justice. It was 34-0 at one point, 40-6 at one point. A couple of garbage touchdowns late by the Chiefs made that one look only semi-respectable. So no three-peat for Kansas City. The Eagles get their revenge from 2 years ago. The Eagles are champs. Jalen Hurts, MVP. What a way to end the season, Dave.
Yeah, that was that game. I expected a closer game. I think a lot of people did. Heck, I think the closing line was 1 point on this game, and the Eagles came out. Vic Fangio should have been MVP, I think, and not to take anything away from Jalen Hurts, and obviously a coach doesn't get MVP. But if there was ever a year that you could make a case for a coach or a coordinator to be MVP of the Super Bowl, that one certainly was it. And look, no three-peat, it's so hard to do, and I think the fact that the Chiefs got themselves in a position to even do that, speaks obviously volumes, especially in today's, NFL world of cash and cap and trying to keep teams together like that and make runs, and the luck that has to be involved with that from the injury standpoint and all like that. I think it speaks volumes that they got themselves in position to do it, and it would have been quite an accomplishment had they pulled off the three-peat. But I think a lot of things that I had been kind of betting against throughout the season when it came to the Chiefs finally came home to roost, and they played obviously a good defense in the Eagles, and the Chiefs. They picked a hell of a damn time to have their certainly their worst game of the season, and all that just got kind of compounded on them, and then you kind of get what you got last night there in New Orleans there. So, congrats to the Eagles, and on to 2025 we go.
This really felt like the other Super Bowl the Chiefs lost against Tampa Bay, where the front four, the four-man rush got home. Eagles could drop 7, play a variety of coverages, not blitz a single time. There was a lot of zone, a lot of matchup zone. They didn't play a ton of man, but they really had Mahomes in trouble. The lack of weapons that Kansas City doesn't have, I should say, was exposed with Kelsey out of the game. You only had Worthy. Rice isn't available. There really weren't other receivers. Juju caught 2 early passes and then didn't catch one the rest of the game. And so the O-line was certainly overwhelmed by that Eagles front four. And so it really goes back to the just, can you, pass protect and can you pass rush? And Eagles could do both, and they came out on top. I had fun. Probably the most fun I had the entire night, considering the blowout it was watching Dave, you track every failed third down conversion the Chiefs had, because you harped on that and you're right about it. The Chiefs were so good on third down throughout the season. They were 8, I think, to start the game, finished, I don't know, the numbers 3-12 or something like that. So on third down situational football where the Chiefs had been winning, they were dominated.
The thing that stuck out throughout the season when it came to them and look, you don't get a good sense, especially when using adjusted net yards per passing attempt, until you get 8, 9, 10 games in the book across the league, because it can obviously be set off by, one or two good or bad games either way. But once you got into that point and you started moving forward into it, the Chiefs offensively, they just did not have that number. And we've seen, other stats kind of bear it out too. When you look at the air yard completed distance and the intended air yards when it came to Patrick Mahomes, and even going all the studying that we did going into the Chiefs game against the Steelers, where they try to win with that short, quick game out on the edges, and even though it's not a run game, it's like an elongated run game, and you got to really put them in situations where they have to try to force to push the football down the field. And the other thing that obviously stood out that counteracted the fact that the Chiefs weren't putting up a good adjusted net yards per passing attempt number that really stuck out to me. We had a couple of talks about this, was that third down conversion percentage that they had. They led the league, in well over 50%, I think, for most of the season there. And that was the thing that they were hanging their hat on, as they were either getting enough of those 4, 5, 6 yards on first and second down that they were avoiding third downs altogether, or when they were getting in third down situations, most of the time they were third and short situations, and they were able to convert those. And it felt to me like if you got in, and look, you even go back to the AFC Championship game. What did we say? The Chiefs only faced like 9 third down situations in that game against the Bills, and they converted something like 5 of those, I think. So it felt to me like going into this game, if the Chiefs, who had played well or the Eagles, who had played well defensively for a lot of the season, could get the Chiefs in a lot of third downs, especially early in this game, and then get off the field in those situations, that might be a key to this game. And yeah, brother, you can bet I was counting those things, especially when it got to like 0-3, because it's easy to count 0-1 on third down. This looks like a trend. And you get to 0-2. Well, you get to 0-3, and you're talking about the Chiefs to start off the Super Bowl. You start raising your eyebrows a little bit, and then what was it? Was it the 0-4 or the 0-5 one? Was the pick 6 that Mahomes had threw? But when and look, it wasn't all the Eagles, because I think Hopkins had a drop in there. Was one of them that probably should have been converted. There might have been another one within the first 8 or so, like that. But the thing is too, that the Eagles were doing what they needed to do offensively to put points on the board and put even more pressure on the Chiefs. But yeah, when that thing got to 0-8, I mean, that was obviously, I think, the difference in the game. And I think the Chiefs in the first half of this game ran something like, what was it, 35 plays through the first 3 quarters of the game, and something like just 48 or so plays for the entire game. And Patrick Mahomes can't beat you if he's not on the field, for a lot of plays. So the Chiefs ended 3 of 11 after going 0 for 8 on their first 8 third down conversions. And obviously, by the time they started clicking off the 3 consecutive third downs later in the game was, for all practical purposes, over at that point. Yeah, they ran 49 plays in total, the Chiefs did, and I think something like 35 or 37 through the first 3 quarters overall. And the Eagles, on the other hand, ran 70 total plays for this game. So, I thought the Eagles front 4, they didn't have to blitz hardly any. I think there's a stat out there saying they didn't blitz any, but I think if you mix in a couple of kind of, fire zones or whatnot, but I mean, for the most part, they were only having to send 4 all the games. So that narrative really stands, and they were able to sit back and did a good job of spying Mahomes and collapsing that pocket around him for the most part. And Mahomes threw a couple of picks in this game, and the Eagles capitalize, and there you go. That's your ball game.
Well said. I'm trying to pull up the exact numbers from the Super Bowl last night, but just 1 point to the third down lack of success Kansas City had, and it's obvious. But in the regular season, the Chiefs were tied for the second lowest third down yards needed in the NFL at 6.3. Only the Lions are better at 6.2, and I'm not sure what that number was for the Super Bowl last night, but I promise you it wasn't an average of needing 6.3 yards. They were consistently in third and long. They had no run game, and the Eagles could really pin their ears back and just overwhelmed. And while the Chiefs kicked out Joe Tooney to play left tackle, that made them weaker at left guard, and that interior rush, Carter and Milton Williams, who's really underrated, I believe a free agent this offseason, should get paid handsomely. Jordan Davis, those guys really went to work on the middle of that pocket. The edge guys forced Mahomes to step up, look uncomfortable, and that was really all she wrote. So, yeah, that's what it comes down to in this one. It almost had a Steelers Eagles from this year kind of vibe. Like you said, Eagles ran 70 plays, had almost 37 minutes time of possession. The Chiefs just 49, and almost a quarter of those were third downs. And so, the Chiefs just had no run game. I mean, the Chiefs did a great job defensively. Saquon Barkley had his lowest yards per carry the entire season. If you had told sports fans that going into this game, most people would probably pick the Chiefs, but the Eagles proved they could throw the ball. Hurts played a really good game overall, and frankly, they won offensively because of Jalen Hurts in the pass game.
Yeah, they were able to pop some explosive plays along the way. Let's see, they had the I think the Chiefs only had one explosive play, and I think that was that 50-yard touchdown to Worthy in this one. And even let's see, how many did the Eagles have in this one? Let me make sure that's right on the Chiefs. No, the Chiefs had two of them 50 yards, both to Worthy there. And then they also had, oh, wait a minute, they did have more than that there. They had all three went to Worthy. I thought there was just the one, but there was 250-yard completions to Worthy that they had, and they had another Mahomes to Worthy for 24 yards. So they had three in total, but all three of those came from late in the third quarter on. Their first 50-yard gain was 2:33 left in the third. Their second for a touchdown with 43 seconds left in the third, and then their final one 1:56 left in the ball game there. So for a greater portion of the game, they were shut out with the in the explosive play column. But the Eagles, on the other hand, had looks like five of them, and two of those went for touchdowns in this game there. So the difference was obviously, I think field position played a pretty decent part in this game, and the Eagles weren't great on third down overall, but they were kind of maximizing their opportunities, and especially off of turnovers and those kind of things in this game. And I thought Hurts at the right time used his legs to move the chains in this game. And you hit on it. The Chiefs were unable to run the football. They had 7 carries by their running backs for 24 yards in total there, and the Eagles were just doing just enough, and it was a big boost, obviously, with Jalen Hurts and his legs to help kind of overcome Saquon Barkley not having a huge game overall.
Dave, what lessons, if any, should
I
the
was
Steelers?
gonna ask you the same question.
Well, I'll ask it to you first then. What lessons should Pittsburgh be learning from this Eagles win? I almost have this thought, and I say this a little tongue-in-cheek, but also a little not, that Mike Tomlin, watching that game last night, says, boys, we just got to load up on defense. Defense is the path. We are on the right track. We just have to get our defense to be an elite group, and that's how we're going to win this thing. Forget about having the best offense. We need the best defense, and that kind of Tomlin mentality. But what lessons are there to take away?
Yeah, and the other that's a great question, because I had that poised to ask you, and I think the other question is do Steeler fans feel better about themselves this morning after watching the Super Bowl? Look, it's too easy and this goes back to what Rooney said after the season. This goes back what you and I basically have said the day the season ended when it comes to the draft, is they got to address this defensive line. And because this team wasn't you just cannot sit back and wait for TJ Watt to make a play in the third or fourth quarter of the game and then roll from there. And yes, Cameron Hayward had a great season, but I think it's a lot to ask for Cameron Hayward to kind of duplicate that. I think Alex Highsmith's fine. I think you definitely can win with him on the outside. I think you can win with Nick Herbig coming in to rotate between Watt and Highsmith. But you got to get stronger along that defensive line there. Period. Larry Ogunjobi's just not cutting it there. I do think Bitten, if you kind of kick him, maybe kick him out and get a better true nose tackle in there, I think you can have some success there. But I do think the Steelers start getting better this offseason by strengthening up that defensive line and being able to prevent any team from being able to run on them. I think it starts there. That's not the end all do all, but I think that's the first hole that you got to plug up heading into this offseason. And if it takes 2 draft picks to do it, so be it. But I think it starts there. The second thing is, and I think we've got an email somewhere in the email machine about this too. People are wondering, well, would based off what Jalen Hurts did, can we just kind of drop Justin Fields into the same kind of situation? And in other words, can the Steelers just do that with Jalen Hurts? I mean, with Justin Fields? And to some degree, I get it because you got the mobility aspect of a Justin Fields and all like that. But still, there's 5 or 6 plays within a game that you need to be able to throw the football and fill the blitz and stand in the pocket and make throws. And you got to figure out if you're going to go with Justin Fields specifically this next season. Can you get him to do that? Those 4 or 5 plays in a game really, really make the difference. Now, can Justin Fields give you the mobility aspect and some of the things that Jalen Hurts obviously gives the Eagles? Yes, but it's a little bit more than just dropping him into the same offense and saying, go get him and putting up, 40 points on the scoreboard, 40 points on the scoreboard, albeit, one of those was a pick 6, obviously there, but it goes a little bit longer than that. And I think the other aspect is too, and look, the Eagles did not run great in this game, but throughout the season, the Eagles did run well. You got to get that offensive line to be at the caliber of the Philadelphia Eagles, and obviously, I think the main narrative coming out of this is look at how the Eagles have addressed their trenches over the last several drafts and free agency or what have you there. And I think that's the learning point that you take away from there overall is you got to build up those trenches overall and then, kind of move on from there.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly fair. There's a simplicity to how the Eagles won with great offensive line play, great defensive line play. They ran the ball well. They rushed the passer. They led the NFL in sacks this year. They had the top running back in football. And if you do those things consistently, then don't beat yourself with turnovers and dumb mistakes, you're going to be a tough out. And Eagles certainly world champs in large part because. But I mean, I do think Pittsburgh is already aware of that in the sense of they have invested heavily in the O-line. They brought over Andy Weidl from Philadelphia, who was part of what the Eagles were trying to build up. We'll see defensive line investments, I think, this year to shore up that end of the equation. I mean, I think overall the problems Pittsburgh has remains the same. I think we're all aware of them as we were Saturday, as we are today. But I just think my takeaway in terms of something new, because yes, run the ball, have a good offensive line, have a good pass rush. Those are always key. But the extra layer that scheme is able to provide you, because if you want to be a Super Bowl contender, you need talent, of course, but you're going to always face talented teams too. The Chiefs were a talented team. The Eagles, I think, had the best roster, and the NFL had the better roster of the two, but a really talented team. But both teams got there in part because of the talent, obviously, but in part because they had great coaching and fantastic scheme. And we saw Vic Fangio really, had Mahomes' number in this one, the variety of coverages that he played. We saw that against the Steelers where they rotated coverages and they matched well, and Russ couldn't read things, and you're fooling, slowing down these veteran quarterbacks, which leads to pressure and unsuccessful offenses. Even the Chiefs, I thought Spagnuolo still had good calls in this game, situational stuff with his blitz packages, and of course had some big money calls, including in the AFC title game to get to this point. And so you just watch some of these teams and the schemes they throw and the game plans they have, and you sit there and say, man, when was the last time Pittsburgh did some of those things? And you got to go back and think a bit about that.
Yeah, the other thing that made me excited about the Chiefs losing is I was going to have some explaining to do had they won the Super Bowl with a regular season adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat of 5.9.
Yeah. So what were the Eagles' numbers to
For the regular season, the Eagles offense was 6.9, which obviously isn't, I mean, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens had a 9.3. Now that's not, history tells you that's not sustainable, with them. But I mean, for what they did throughout the season, I mean, that's an impressive number. The Lions had an 8.1 number. You want that number on offense to be, very, very, if not 7.0, very close to it. And that's where the Eagles were offensively at 6.9 overall. What really got it for them is they had the best defensive adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat in the NFL during the regular season at 4.8. I mean, that's just, there was no other team below 5.1, I believe, was the next closest team, and that was the Vikings. So, I think it bore out that defense along with, combined, they played a lot of complementary football throughout the season. If you kind of go back and think about what the Eagles did, and is 6.9 the end all do all of adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat numbers? No, but I mean, history shows that you better have that number at the very minimum, probably around 6.2, 6.4 on offense if you want to try to compete. And go deeper into playoffs. Now, the Steelers for the season were 6.2. That obviously was a little bit better than it had been the last couple seasons, but not good enough. So there is a lesson within that their offense still has to get a little bit better, specifically when it comes to not giving up sacks, not turning the football over, and obviously scoring the football through the air there. But the Eagles were a balanced team. They had a differential of 2.1, the fourth best differential, whereas the Chiefs were a dead even team right in the middle of the league at 5.9 on offense, 5.9 on defense. And once again, I was sitting there rooting for counting the third downs and all, but I just more and more, I was just wanting the Chiefs to lose, because I would have had some explaining to do had they won the Super Bowl with a regular season adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat number of 5.9.
Right, would have always been the but, or the exception to what is usually the rule, but the rule prevails, and certainly there was domination by the Eagles.
And then once again, the reason I think the Chiefs win as far as what they did, I think that rolls back to trying to find a reason behind it, was the third down conversions. And you stop them on third down with an offense that generally doesn't push the football down the field with regularity. If you can get them in enough third down situations and get off the field, that's how you beat them, and that's how ultimately the Eagles beat them. Now, here's the thing, though, and it'll get lost in all this last night. I mean, Patrick Mahomes can still push the football down the field. That damn touchdown that he threw to Worthy, that ball from launch point went like 65, 66 yards in the air and was a strike, man. I mean, that guy can still sling it and always has been able to sling it. And I think Mahomes even said, I didn't hear all the press conference, but he said during the offseason he's got to work on kind of changing his game and how teams are defending him and those kind of things. Because if you take that quick, short game away from him on the outside and take those quick slants away from him, they force them to push the football down the field, and more specifically, they've got to figure out, the Chiefs do, how to convert those third and longs. And that
Right.
they obviously were in too many of those situations and couldn't do that last night. They're going to need some offensive line help in the draft or free agency. The Chiefs are, and yeah, they have Worthy and Rice, but both those guys are kind of smaller receivers, right? So,
Hmm.
and Hopkins is seen his better days. Obviously, Juju has a foot out of the league at this point. They're going to need another bigger body wide receiver to kind of start taking some of that pressure off Travis Kelce if he comes back and plays at least another season or so. So I think there were minor lessons to be learned overall. But I think, to go back to the original question here, where what the Steelers learned from the Eagles, it's not a surprise overall, especially with Andy Weidel coming from that organization. There is, you got to build up those trenches to start with, and then you've got to have above average quarterback play.
Sure. And as Mahomes talked about trying to beat shell coverage on third down, those too high looks. Remember, the NFL is really tilted more towards too high shells in the past 2, 3, 4 seasons. And that's largely in response to Patrick Mahomes. Because back in the heyday, when the Chiefs were putting up video game numbers and they had speed everywhere, and it was Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, teams were playing too high to take away the deep ball and put a lid on things and force the Chiefs to win underneath, which they were doing. But you're seeing Mahomes struggle more in those situations this year when they were in third and long. Teams are playing too high, cover four, cover two, and Mahomes can't push the ball down the field in those moments, and the pressure gets home, and the offense really gets exposed. The other point, obvious as it is, go back to fundamentals of football. You had mentioned it Friday, Dave, how well the Chiefs were taking care of the football. They were keeping games close. They weren't beating themselves with penalties, with turnovers. They hadn't turned the ball over in their final 5 or 6 regular season games. They turned the ball over 3 times against Philadelphia. One a pick six, one that was almost, I think, a pick six that led to a score. That's 14 points right there. And so they had not turned the ball over since 3 times in a game since week 2. That was the only time this year they had turned the ball over 3 times in a game, the Chiefs did. And so when the Eagles win the turnover battle, they're +2. They were positive, I assume, in the talk stat. You're going to win those games 80% of the time. And the Eagles certainly showed that last night.
And didn't the Chiefs? I mean, the Chiefs, in areas where they were normally good throughout the season, they obviously were bad. And as we talked about third downs, we talked about, you just hit on the turnovers there, and then they helped keep a couple of drives alive for the Eagles on the defensive side with some penalties on the, even though I think one of those, the hit to the head or whatnot, early in the game, I think. That felt more like a makeup call for that OPI early in the game there. But jumping off sides and things, other kind of silly penalties help keep some Eagles drives live as well too. So here's a question that I had for you, and I have not gone back and watched the game again, and I don't think you have either.
No.
I probably will at some point here, over the next couple of weeks or so. But what do you think about the tackling on both sides of the football for both these teams, just at first blush?
Yeah, trying to think back. I don't recall either side being poor tacklers. I don't recall a lot of yak, but you tell me, Dave.
It felt to me like both teams tackled very well,
Yeah, I think.
especially the Eagles, but I thought the Chiefs, for the most part, did a good job of tackling.
Yeah, I thought defensively both teams were fairly fundamentally sound. I thought they had good game plans and there was a lot of execution there. I mean, the Eagles, like I said, they got points off turnovers directly or almost directly. I mean, the Chiefs stopped the run. They got pressure. The offense did nothing, and just the Eagles eventually broke through.
Right. What would your main takeaway be for a positive for the Steelers coming out of the Super Bowl?
I don't know. I mean, like I said, the takeaway to me is that scheme element and the value of good coaching. And listen, it's a fair point. The Eagles, they had fired their OC and their DC going into 2024 after the 2023 season. I think those guys were first year on the jobs. It was Sean Desai and forget who the Eagles OC was, and they made changes there and brought in Kellen Moore, who's now almost certainly going to be the head coach of the Saints, and Vic Fangio. And so they made some pretty drastic changes in response to a giant collapse, because that was an Eagles team that totally fell apart in 2023, similar to Pittsburgh. In 2024, the Steelers are staying static and patient, and the Eagles are making radical changes. The Eagles obviously got great results from it. We'll see what the results are for Pittsburgh. But you'd ask the question, should Steeler fans feel better about the state of the team based on the outcome of last night? I don't think so. I think you feel the same. The problems yesterday are the same problems today. They still seem as far away as ever in recent memory from being in Super Bowl contention. The odds came out for 2026 last night. Pittsburgh is in the bottom half for every sports book and odds maker out there. And so I don't think you feel better or worse. I think you feel the same, but how you feel right now is not very good.
Right. I would agree overarching, yes, but let me rephrase the question. How do you think the majority of Steeler fans feel coming out of this?
As in better or worse?
Yeah. I get
I
the
don't know how you can feel better. I don't know how you feel better.
I get the overarching sense that they're trying to make themselves. Matthew Marksy came off the top rope with a post this morning saying Yinzer shot. What? How do you pronounce that?
Schadenfreude?
Yeah, Schadenfreude illustrates how far Steelers have fallen and all like that. But I did kind of get the sense that and look, as a fan, you have. As a true fan, you have kind of this eternal optimism, like, all right, we'll go get them next year and all. But I do the way that game was played, and ended up. I kind of got more of a sense that Steeler fans feel like, oh, okay, we got, we can put Justin Fields in a situation like Jalen Hurts, and a couple of draft picks on a defensive line, and good to go. And that's kind of a loose feel of what following the social media and all. But I kind of went to bed last night thinking that majority of Steeler fans had a little bit of more optimism last night by the way that the Eagles beat the Chiefs.
I see your point in the sense of
not that they should, but how I felt the temperature being.
What the Steelers are trying to do is the vision of what the Eagles did, as in invest heavily in trenches, O-line, D-line, maybe not have elite quarterback play. They didn't have. Hurts would not be considered a top 3 quarterback in the NFL going into last night's game, for example. And so the model maybe is there for Pittsburgh, but man, Dave, how far away are they from executing what the Eagles did at that high level with that elite level run game, with that elite defensive line and pass rush? So, yes, I guess in a sense I see what you're saying, but I still think Pittsburgh is such a far away from matching personnel and scheme and consistency to that degree.
What was that stat that you had a couple years ago on takeaways?
Yeah, it's gotten modified, and the 17-game season kind of screwed things up, but something about, every Super Bowl winner had at least 20 takeaways, something like that. I don't know exactly where the Eagles fell this year. I'm guessing they were above that number for the regular
Wasn't
season.
it a little higher than that? Wasn't it like 24?
It was originally 25, and then I think
Okay.
maybe it gotten changed to, maybe it was 25. I'm trying to think back, but like I said, the extra game has kind of screwed stuff up here slightly. I'll look up where the Eagles were at for the season.
26, wasn't it, for the regular season for the Eagles?
Yes. So if we stick with that, they're right on the right side of things.
And obviously they only gave it away 15 times, so they had a net differential of plus 11. The Steelers took the football away. They tied for the league lead in takeaways on defense this past season with 33, and they had a net differential of 16, which put them second in the NFL, only to Buffalo. Now, obviously, during that final 5-game span, if you look at that in a in its own category, they obviously weren't great in there. They really were able to inflate that stat throughout the first 3 quarters of the season there. But when you play better, I think the takeaway there is when you play the better teams, and especially in that second half of the season, the Baltimores, the Chiefs, the Eagles, you go through the list there. You got to be better of stopping the run and taking the football away, and then obviously scoring points.
Right. Yeah, I think Pittsburgh was, I don't know, -1 or even over that 5-game collapse there, and so that was a stark contrast. And one reason why they collapsed, they were winning the turnover battle consistently and by big margins during their 10-3 start, and they weren't doing that down the stretch. And again, Chiefs winning the turnover battle consistently throughout their regular season playoff run, and they were +2 or -2, excuse me, last night. The Eagles winning the turnover battle 3-1, and some really weighty takeaways at that with the pick six from Cooper DeJean. So, yeah, that is the lesson. I think there is a sense of fundamentals that last night reminded us all of.
What'd you think about, and for the most part, the game was already over at that point, but it was really over after they had stopped the Chiefs on downs on the fourth down, and you turn around on flipping the field and you take the shot play and you hit on the shot play. I mean, that's I love that. Put them away, especially the change of possession. You dial up a shot play in that situation. I'm sure the Chiefs probably thought they were going to run, and it came off. I believe play action to Barkley as well too. Had everybody kind of frozen, and you nail that shot play, and that just slammed the door on the situation right there.
And that goes back to great coaching with a great feel for the game. The Chiefs are deflated. They just, struck out, and the momentum's in the Eagles' favor, and you go for the dagger right then and there. And that was what the Hurts to Devonta Smith play, I believe. And so, yeah, that's just a great feel for the game and great timing and great coaching. And, of course, good execution.
All right. Any other takeaways?
Well, just quickly, what are your thoughts on some of the other pieces of the Super Bowl? I'm the only one who liked the score bug, apparently. Twitter was roasting me for my opinion on that. But what was your take? Did you like the score bug? Did you dislike it? Your thoughts?
I thought it was fine. I'm old. I have to wear glasses when I use the computer now throughout the day, and I've gotten old. I like things simple and easy to find in my oldness now. So I wasn't turned off. I didn't go running downstairs and tell my wife, "Oh my God, you ought to see this new score bug" or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I was indifferent to it. I didn't hate it. How about that?
You didn't hate it the way that 90% of the internet seemed to hate it. Yeah, that's kind of my thought. I mean, it was very simplistic, and that's good for your audience because you're bringing in a whole new audience for the Super Bowl of casual fans, non-football fans, and to have that kind of clean, clear text is, I think, important. Now, I think there was a couple of weird things. Maybe it could have needed a background, the play clock, some of the stats that would kind of appear in the bottom left corner, not super visible. So there was a little bit of weirdness to it, but I like the approach of the score bug overall. The broadcast
what's that new cell phone for old people that's got the giant, not too many buttons?
I don't know, but I'm sure you're going to order it here soon, Dave. The broadcast itself, I thought, was pretty clunky, though. There weren't a ton of replays early. I thought Brady was struggling. The analysis was okay, but just trying to be in sync with the production team, there was some weird hiccups there that I thought just kind of showed some clunkiness. And I don't know, I didn't really like the whole Fox presentation from the actual broadcast.
I still think at this point in time where we are, when Romo first started coming in as a broadcaster, I thought Romo was very good, and I think Romo has listened too much to kind of his detractors, I think, and it's kind of, to me, it feels like Romo kind of isn't the same Romo that he was initially. And I think Brady, because of his ties, obviously, to the Raiders and all the criticism, I think he's trying to be too perfect. I think right now Greg Olson is the single best color guy out there because he just lets it rip. He's got obviously a lot of knowledge about the game. I think he really has a great feel for what both the average fan and the experienced fan wants to hear out of a color commentator. And I think he's, up until this point, has done a great job of not listening to whatever critics are out there. So I think it was kind of a disservice. I'll be interested now, especially with the ties that Brady has to the Raiders and all like that, and all the pushback on that. And I think overall, Brady's first season wasn't a great one. I think he became more and more too careful. He obviously has a knowledge of the game, right? But I just don't think he gets out there and lets it rip, and I think his ties, the league's going to have to do something about it. I think I don't think you're going to see Brady stay in that role too much longer. And so, thus I think it was a disservice to kind of kick Greg Olson out of lead chair there, because I think Greg Olson, even especially with this one, it ended up getting away. I think Greg Olson could have probably done a better job coloring this one overall. I mean, that's a tough job, you know.
Yeah, and for Brady to be in his first year and call a Super Bowl is asking a lot. And like, this is not me hating on Tom Brady from
Right.
some sort of Steelers bias. Like, I thought Brady had gotten better throughout the year. I thought he did a great job in the NFC Championship game. I thought he brought some really good insight and energy. And again, not even the analysis in this game, like that was just okay. I'm not even critiquing what he said, but just things like, he's trying to circle the Eagles front five and they cut away to
Right.
the regular shot. And so you kind of screw that up. And there was one where he misidentified a block, and there was one where they were doing Super Bowl, one weights to the old offensive line versus today. And Brady seemed to interrupt and ruin the flow of that conversation. They had to pick it back up after the next play. Just stuff like that. I mean, it's not gonna make or break your experience, but just felt it was clunky overall.
Look, once again, that's tough to do. I couldn't do it. You know, nowhere close to the way those guys do it. But uh, yeah, I think Greg Olson's the best at doing it right now, personally.
Sure, I'm with you. In my days of calling a handful of D2 Clarion football games on TV for our little station, probably pales in comparison with this. So
I'm
tough
gonna have
job.
to. You have any copies of those laying around? Surely you do.
I don't know if I do, if they're online still or not, but if they are, I'm going to make sure you never find them. So that'd be
I'm gonna have to
my
find
thoughts
them
on that.
now.
There is one of me as because I was doing directing, and there's a little director reel of me on my YouTube channel buried somewhere of me behind the scenes and mic'd up just to put out there back in the days before I realized I was going to do this full time. But anyway, um, halftime show. I'm sure you have big thoughts on the halftime show, Dave. Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah, I'm pretty indifferent to that stuff. I know I'm old now when I watch Saturday Night Live, and I don't even know who the host or the musical guest is at this point. So I'm really indifferent to that kind of stuff there.
Yeah, I thought it was good, but I'm not an
I'm
expert
still
on these
trying to
things.
figure out how they got all those people in that Grand National.
That was I think that was little our first takeaway, because my first thought at the start of the show was is that a Buick Grand National? And so it apparently was, right?
Yeah, at first I thought it was a Monte Carlo, but the deeper I got into it, oh, that's a Grand National. But obviously I know how they did that, but it was funny to see all those people climb out of
Hmm.
that car.
Yeah, that's shows how old we are when that's kind of our big takeaway from the halftime show. The commercials, we should only mention the commercials in part because if you were watching locally in Pittsburgh, there was a commercial that came across, I think early fourth quarter or so, from some law group in the Pittsburgh area that threw some major shade at Mike Tomlin. I forget the exact quote, but something to the effect of, "Can we fire head coaches who are underachieving," or something like that. And so that drew a lot of buzz on social media.
That fleshy cowboy head gave me bad dreams last night.
Which
Commercial.
one was that? I barely remember which one that was, to be honest. I
That
kind
was
of
a
tuned out.
Tubi one, I think.
Was it?
There, but
The seal one to me kind of was off-putting. I don't know. I didn't like the seal with seal.
well, with the age, I'll tell you this: with the age of the internet now, look, in my younger days, you're at Super Bowl parties and everybody's hyped up and all like that because you didn't have the age of the internet for immediately after the Super Bowl to go back and watch all the commercials again. I pay less attention to them now than I did back when I was younger, because I can spend all of or most of Monday going back through and watching them again. And then also I'd already seen like about 8 of them, I think, before the Super Bowl, because the blog the site that I have, and as long as it's been around, all these media companies send me promo copies to try to promote and all like that beforehand via email and all these days. So I had seen like a good 8 or 9 of them, I think, just in links of emails prior to the Super Bowl. So I pay less attention. I think the one with Matt Damon and who was the soccer guy that with
I don't
the
even remember
beer
the commercial.
commercial. I thought that one was cute,
All right. Yeah, look like
funny.
decent reception overall, but again, everyone else can be the judge of that. All right, Dave.
I've just gotten old. That's the takeaway.
And I'm an old soul, so neither of us are really in tune probably with what's cool these days. All right, David, it's a lot of Super Bowl talk, but obviously it is the number one discussion point in the sports world today. Let's go to Steelers talk now, though. There is certainly a couple topics to hit since we last spoke on Friday. There is a coaching addition of some sort. We're still a little uncertain on all the details and potential domino effect here, but according to, I forget the report that came out on, I think that was Friday or Saturday, the Steelers are hiring back Gerald Alexander to coach their secondary. Alexander spent 2 years as Pittsburgh's assistant defensive backs coach before leaving to become the Raiders safeties coach in 2024 with the Raiders' new coaching staff under Pete Carroll. Alexander coming back over from Las Vegas to Pittsburgh. Now, the question is, the reporting from Cameron Wolford was, who said he's going to be taking over the secondary, hired as their defensive backs coach. Does that mean Grady Brown has left? Does that mean he's being promoted? Is Alexander coming back as an assistant again? We still have no clarity on that. What will happen with current 2024 assistant DBs coach Anthony Midget? Is he gone? Is he in a different role? We just simply do not know anything other than Alexander is returning to the team to coach the secondary in some capacity.
Yeah, that's literally all we know at this point. And in fact, the Steelers media website still has, I believe, as of this morning, Grady Brown listed, and I don't believe they've added Alexander yet. But Alexander did confirm that on Twitter already the other night, and also, we'll just have to see the rest of this shake out. And I would imagine within this next week, most of that will be put to bed.
What happens if this team loses Grady Brown, who had gotten his DC look in Atlanta? That did not happen. We don't know his status for sure. I'm happy to bring Alexander back over, but if you had an offseason where you lost Aaron Curry and Grady Brown, two of the seemingly young, up-and-coming coaches you did have on your staff, man, that's a really crushing blow.
Yeah, I wouldn't have had that on my bingo card that those would have been the first two out the door. If indeed that happens with Grady Brown, obviously we know Curry's gone, but I certainly wouldn't have had that as my two selections to be gone.
Right. So we just don't have the information right now. Now, Alexander, like I said, he wasn't even listed as a coach, I think, for the 2022 season, and then he popped up in 2023 as the assistant defensive backs coach, and then again left for the Raiders. So, good young coach, and that was kind of the report from Wolf, and so that's going to be an asset. I just need to know more about what happens with Grady Brown, who I think is going to be a future DC someday, somewhere, and then what will happen with Anthony Midget. Now, what if Alexander just an add-on? What if he's just going to be an extra set of hands in that room? Then that's more the better, but we'll just have to wait and see.
And then who's going to take over the inside linebacker job?
Right. We have not heard a single candidate. We have not obviously heard about the position being filled. It's been all quiet there. And so if the Steelers offseason changes are changing their linebackers coach and changing their defensive backs coach, those were not the changes I think anybody was pining for. And it's going to certainly the fan base is already underwhelmed. They're not changing coordinators, not changing head coach. And so at best, you're going to get a couple of positional coach changes. But if those are the changes, to lose Grady Brown and Aaron Curry, it'll be even a bigger disappointment than I could have imagined.
Yeah, and then we'll obviously see what happens here with Carl Dunbar. I think he's been another one people have been speculating about possibly contract being up.
Right, so just wait and see on a whole lot of those things. Hopefully we'll have some more information for a little bit later this week. All right, Dave, a lot of receiver talk here recently. We know Pittsburgh's going to add a receiver in some form or fashion this offseason after failing to adequately do so this past offseason. The question is who and where and how, all those kinds of things. Talked a lot about Cooper Kupp the last show. Enter a new 49ers receiver. We had so much fun talking about 49ers receivers in trades last year. Let's do it again this year with Deebo Samuel, who's been granted permission to seek out a trade by the 49ers after they re-signed Brandon Ayuk. We had known this was going to be almost inevitable after they re-signed Ayuk last year. They were not going to be able to keep both Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. And so Samuel, now coming off a relatively quiet season, is exploring a trade. So, Dave, kind of walk us through your thoughts on Debo, and also contractually, can Pittsburgh make this happen? Will they have interest? The contract status for Samuel? Take it from there.
Yeah, and I think you roll back to what, prior to last year's draft and all, and kind of the buzz, and I think kind of reporting at the time saying the Steelers were interested in a potentially a 49ers wide receiver. And I think there was even a good report or two out there that they were interested in Debo Samuel, and obviously that didn't come to fruition. And then the 49ers, then there was the whole Brandon Ayuk thing that we went through for most of the offseason there. And ultimately he re-upped with the 49ers. And then at that point, I think even Michael Silver, who longtime NFL writer, obviously covered the 49ers, started wondering, could a guy like Debo potentially be gone at the trade deadline if 49ers didn't live up to expectations? And obviously that didn't come to fruition. And now here we are back kind of wondering, because of the writing was kind of on the wall that even if Debo stayed throughout the 2024 season, would he be out the door come 2025? And that now indeed seems in some way, shape, or form will happen. Now, when you look at, let's say the Steelers do have reported, going back to last offseason, let's say they did have that interest in trading for him, and let's say that does carry over to this offseason. A lot different situation here. Obviously, Samuel did not have the best season, banged up a little bit there, and I think you start with looking at his contract here. And this is a guy that's due nearly a $15.5 million option bonus on March 22nd, which is obviously after the start of the new league year. He only has technically the 2025 year left on his contract because the rest are void years, which will void in a year from now in February there. He is currently set to earn nearly $17.5 million in cash based on how his current contract is structured, and that includes the likely to be earned portion of his per game roster bonus. And once again, he's only under contract through the 2025 season. That needs to be looked at. Now, if you add all that up and you think about the 49ers trying to trade him, they're much like Cooper Kupp. It feels like the 49ers, to get him traded, are going to have to eat some of that option, a good portion of that option bonus that he's due in March to get him gone. It just feels like no other way around it. And if indeed they're willing to do that to get Debo Samuel gone, there's going to be several teams interested in him because he's younger than Cooper Kupp. I think he's still got some good years left in him. And with this not being a great free agent wide receiver group overall, and that could obviously get lessened depending on if the Bengals are able to retain a guy like T. Higgins. There's going to be a market for him if indeed the 49ers are willing to eat some of that option bonus there. And here's the other aspect of it. To make Debo more attractive, will he be willing to sign a new deal, albeit still lucrative-ish, to make it worth trading for him? Because no team wants to give up a lot of capital and a lot of cash in one season in what could potentially be just a one-year rental for him on top of it there. So there's a lot of how does this all relate to the Steelers? Well, once again, if you believe the reports from last offseason, the Steelers had some interest in him, and if the 49ers were indeed willing to take somewhat of a bath on a good portion of the option bonus, then I could see the Steelers potentially being interested in him. I'll tell you this, and it's much like the Cooper Kupp situation. They're not going to trade for either Cooper Kupp or Deebo Samuel with their contracts as is right now. It's just not a Steelers thing to do. I think if Deebo Samuel, if the 49ers are willing to come off something, eat some of that option bonus, and if Deebo was willing to, if they gave Deebo permission to work out, an extension with a new team ahead of the deal, that would obviously make him more attractive to a team such as the Steelers. But at best, right now, I would give it at best a 50-50 shot that the Steelers trade for him. I think a lot would need to happen both on the 49ers end and both on Deebo Samuel willing to maybe work out some sort of an extension here for the Steelers to really be considered a player for Deebo Samuel.
What do you think trade compensation for Debo would be? It looks like Kupp. We talked about fifth round picks and reporting they're looking for a fourth. The Rams are, which probably means they'll end up taking a fifth. Is Debo similar, or because he's younger, there might be a little increase in value there?
On a 1-year deal, I mean, I don't see how you can give anything more than a fourth if it's going to be a 1-year rental. I just don't see how you can give the 49ers anything more than a fourth. And even if they were to take a little bit of a bath on that option bonus and eat a good chunk of it, a fourth seems like the ceiling.
I agree. Now, you had mentioned there's a chance the Niners could just cut Debo if they can't find a trade partner. Can you detail that?
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, if you pay that, they're already going to be on the hook for trading or cutting him for a dead money charge of what is it, $31.5 million. So that's already what they're going to be on the hook for if they trade or cut him in dead salary cap money before June 1st. All right. So if you have however much you decide to eat of that option bonus is just going to get tacked on to that on top of it. So could they eat that option bonus and then still try to trade him with hopes of getting some compensation? I suppose, but it might be in their best interest if they can't. Look, if you can get them out the door for anything, even if it's like a fifth or a sixth round pick, and you have to take a bath on a little bit of the option bonus, then I think you got to go that route if you're the 49ers. But it could, if the trade market's just not there for them, they might be just better off just cutting them outright right after the start of the new league year and designate him as a June 1st cut, because I believe they have plenty of salary cap space to work with for the rest of the offseason where they could carry that to June 1st. And then obviously the byproduct of that is you get to push off the future prorated amount to 2026 as dead money, and you only eat the current amount of prorated stuff for 2025, and 2025 is dead money. So I don't think it's totally out of the question that their best path with him might be just to cut him right after the start of the new league year if the trade market's not there. But on the flip side, if they ate some of that option bonus to get them at least past the draft to see for compensation, then if your best that you get's like a fifth or a sixth, then you take that,
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Sure. Do you have more interest in acquiring Cooper Kupp or Deebo Samuel?
I think Deebo, obviously being the younger player, and all that you can do with him still makes him a more marketable player.
Okay. Yeah, that's my inclination as well. I know he had a down year. The whole Niners offense obviously had a down year, so many injuries, and Deebo played through some stuff too. You saw some regression from him. He was not as explosive in the passer run game. He does play, his style though is very physical, very intense. And so while he is younger, you do worry about kind of the wear and tear. He's had a running back role, which is uncommon for receivers, obviously. And he just kind of always had that physical, violent playing nature, which is partially what made him so successful. I was a huge Deebo Samuel fan coming out of South Carolina, and he's had a really strong career. But you do wonder, is the mileage making him an older player than the birth certificate says because of the style and the way he's been used throughout his career?
Well, what was the one thing heading into this season that Debo Samuel had this had the characteristic of the best yak guy in the NFL, probably, right?
Right up there, sure. I can look at some of the numbers of what his yak, even this year, his yak per reception was 8.3,
Right.
which was tied a career low, but that's still a pretty solid number just eyeballing it.
Right, and where did the Steelers struggle at the last several years? Yards after
Mhm.
the catch, right? There, and what was all the last couple of drafts? Kind of some of these players are, oh, he's the next Debo Samuel, looking hard and heavy. Where the benefit would be, and yes, there is wear and tear on him at this point, but I mean, I'd still like to think you got a couple of years of some decent yak out of a guy like him, and I think that's his calling card right now is you get a guy that's physical, a guy that will get the extra yardage for you. And Lord knows the Steelers have got to they regardless of what they do moving forward at the wide receiver position, they have got to increase their yards after the catch.
Yeah, George Pickens, yak per reception by comparison, 3.6. Debo is over 8. Now, there is a average depth of target, and if Samuel is being used in the short area pass game, that's going to, of course, lend itself to more yak. But even so, watching him, his break tackle ability, his size, his strength, all really positive things. And so I could see him as a fit because he's physical. He can wear a lot of hats. I can see Arthur Smith kind of using him the way that they tried to use Cordero Patterson this year as kind of a chess piece, move him around a little bit, pass game, run game, but obviously a much stronger version of Cordero Patterson. And obviously, we get a whole lot more involved to number two receiver, but just in terms of kind of the flexibility that Samuel could offer, I could certainly see that. So I think it's a more attractive option than Cooper Cup. Will it happen? Who's to say for sure? I've just had the mentality that Pittsburgh's going to add a veteran receiver some way, somehow. It's going to be that over the draft in a weaker draft class. And I maintain there are plenty of free agent and trade and potential soon to be free agent, a la Devontae Adams options for Pittsburgh to explore. I think they're going to add one of those guys. I think Debo is as likely as any name you could throw out there. We'll just see what happens.
Yeah, the thing is though that I can't help but roll back on. I mean, you're looking at potential 1 year rentals, and once again, could they end up trading for either one of these guys, Cooper Cup or Debo Samuel? The short answer is yes, but I would not expect either to happen with the both contracts the way they currently stand. I think both the Rams and the 49ers are going to have to eat some roster bonus / option bonus with the case of Debo to get him out the door. And then once again, are you going to trade for a guy that potentially be gone, after 1 year? And I think it'd be interesting to see how willing Debo is maybe to work with a potential trade partner at maybe extending that deal. And I think the Steelers come more into play potentially with Debo Samuel if they were able to negotiate some sort of contract prior to the trade.
Is that why he wants out? I wasn't sure on all the details of why there's a trade request. Is it just because he wants a new deal the Niners are not going to give him because they just paid Ayuk and they got other guys to pay?
Well, as they always say, just follow the money, right?
So that is a question. What does an extension look like for Debo, and how much do you want to pay a guy that's going to be 30 next year
Right.
and you hadn't seen in your system yet? So he's not going to come cheap on an extension. I don't know what that number would be. What was the last deal that he had signed just a couple years back? Because he had initially asked out at San Francisco, and then that led to a new deal to stay in San Francisco. I don't know exactly what that average yearly value was, but I imagine he wants to beat that for maybe that one last good money contract in his 20s.
Yeah, what is his average yearly value right now?
It's like
Uh,
23.85. Does that look accurate to
yeah,
you?
23.85 is his APY right now. So, is he wanting at least that again?
I have to
Yeah,
think he's angling for that 25 with the way the receiver market's heated up.
right. So then once again, if you're looking at the Steelers in historical and trends and outsider, I mean that would be quite the die. It'd be very uncharacteristic for the Steelers.
but some would argue they need to do some
All right.
uncharacteristic things to get some uncharacteristic results of what they've been getting. But do you just give that money to a guy that came off of a down 24 season, or do you maybe try to, pay a younger free agent or just a cheaper free agent option without having to give up the trade capital like a Chris Godwin or somebody like that?
Well, I will say this in my heart of hearts, do I think this is going to happen with Debo? The easy answer is no.
Sure.
So, but could it? I mean, it certainly could. But I mean, they're not going to do. Once again, they're not going to trade for either one of these guys with their contracts as is.
And nothing's happening tomorrow or this week. I think these things are still probably more likely post-combine type stuff where that chatter starts ramping up before the new league year. All I'll say is just like I said, I have more interest in Debo than Cooper Kupp by a long shot, by a wide margin, I should say. And I think he's a better fit, and I think they will add a veteran receiver to be a starter, number two, some way, somehow, before I don't know, before the end of March, we'll say.
All right.
All right, Dave, where to from here? A lot more quarterback chatter. And again, it's just a lot of repackaged stuff and slightly different things. More reporting that Stafford looking likely to stay in Los Angeles, which we had talked about on Friday's show. That always felt like the thing that made the most amount of sense for both sides. Nothing is done until it's done, and there is no contract done for Stafford just yet. I imagine those things will still take some time to happen if and assuming they do occur. Aaron Rodgers does not seem to be returning to the Jets. Multiple reports coming out Sunday, that new regime, Aaron Glenn, etc. Rodgers will not return. Could that mean to Pittsburgh? I think there was a report or a comment from Jerry Dulac early this offseason that said that's not going to happen. Just even though it seems like Rodgers and Tomlin have great respect for each other, it's hard to see Rodgers end up in Pittsburgh.
Oh Lord, are we headed for 8 more weeks of Aaron Rodgers talk and all like that now because of all this and the Matthew Stafford talk and every wide receiver under the sun kind of talk? It kind of feels like we're going to be busy. He said, she said, he reports, she reports, kind of stuff with that. Listen, I mean, what's it with Stafford and Rodgers, it just does not match up with Mike Tomlin and quarterback mobility. Right?
Sure. And then you're truly year to year, and are you even any closer to being a Super Bowl contender? You're barely, if anything. It just does not make sense on a bunch of levels.
It is the Chewbacca theory here. It does not make sense. That's not going to keep us from. It's not going to keep the speculation and the speculative reporting happening and all like that. But I would be shocked if either one of those quarterbacks wind up in Pittsburgh.
But I do think Rodgers wants to play and will play in 2025. And so the question is, where will he go and who makes more sense than Pittsburgh? I could see the Raiders for a season with Pete Carroll, Tom Brady recruiting him. I think there were even some rumors about Tennessee before Rodgers had gotten traded to the Jets, that Rodgers had built a house down in Nashville. I could see the Titans as a sleeper team for Rodgers.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know. I just think he should retire. He evidently he just kind of recently got word that the Jets thing is over with now. So he probably had a pretty good inkling that was going to come to that. So I mean, he's got to decide first if he still wants to play.
Right.
So my hope is my hope is though he just retires and gets it out of the way early. So that's one less off the list that we have to talk about.
And maybe he'll see the market, see there's not a lot of intrigue out there, and say it's just not worth trying to go through a season of waiting as a free agent for months and playing for some small level deal. And maybe that may push him into retirement. We'll just have to see. On the Russell Wilson front, Adam Schefter coming out and I think pushing back on some reports, really Jake Glazer's report that Russ is essentially not going to return to Pittsburgh. And Schefter says no decision has been made. They are in talks with Russell Wilson. Fields is also on the table, but Schefter noted that Fields is going to have a market and have some opportunities to potentially play elsewhere. And so Schefter really left the door much more open than Glazer and was really hinting at that Justin Fields, who's been viewed as the most likely quarterback to return for Pittsburgh, may end up starting and going somewhere else.
Yeah, funny how all these things hit on the morning of the Super Bowl, right? this circles back to the conversation we had at the end of last week, where you got everybody on both sides of this, and almost daily you get one side or the other saying this is likely to happen, or this is likely to happen. We're just going to have to, roll with the reports until something actually does happen, until we get at least one of those two, or neither, I guess, or someone else. As because right now, once again, the only quarterback you have under contract is Skyler.
Yeah. So where this thing goes, we have no idea. We're kind of in the holding pattern and hoping to get answers sooner than later. Again, Pittsburgh, you get a quarterback before free agency opens up. So there's definition for free agents to be about, who's going to be throwing the football this year, especially if you're going to be adding a receiver, a veteran type of guy. If you're going to trade for Deebo Samuel, I'm sure that guy would like to know who's going to be his quarterback this year, all that kind of stuff. And so you'd like to get some progress on this thing, but we'll just have to like I keep saying, we'll just have to wait and see.
Look, nothing that happened over the weekend here has changed my gut feeling that Justin Fields will be the week one quarterback as we sit here right now.
Okay, and that's where I will continue to be until we get some real information otherwise. One last thing, Dave, I want to talk about today. Wrote an article, and I had this thought for the past couple of days to try to have Monday as kind of a big article idea, mock draft, or some other opinion piece. And today is the free agent. When I heard his name and realized he is going to become a free agent, the name I jumped to the most and said, you got to sign this guy. And Pittsburgh's going to add a couple guys. They need help offensively at receiver. Just talked about that. But the name that made me perk up the most and most immediately was Nate Hobbs, the slot corner from the Las Vegas Raiders. And that was really even furthered by the realization and the news that Gerald Alexander, the Raiders safeties coach last year, is coming back over to Pittsburgh. That's a real good tie to help bring a Nate Hobbs to Pittsburgh. Now, I don't know if Alexander coached Hobbs directly last year because he was the safeties coach and Hobbs is a slot corner, but all in the same room. They know each other, obviously. And so this is a guy I've liked for a long time, Nate Hobbs. He's been a, true slot corner, but in every situation, slot corner. He, was a guy that was playing 100% of the snaps at times in games where the Raiders would not play a true base defense. Is very similar to Teron Johnson up in Buffalo, where they are a 4-2-5 type of team and they trust their nickel corner to fit the run and be a quasi linebacker. Hobbs has got good size. He's athletic. He's productive. Can play the run really well. He's an adequate and good enough coverage guy. He's young, turning 26. He should be cheap. PFF projecting $4 million per year is what he's going to get. There have been some injury issues, is kind of the big knock against him. But I think with the hiring of whatever capacity it is for Gerald Alexander, for Nate Hobbs, for a Steelers team day that you know as well as anybody that has not found a long-term replacement to Mike Hilton since he left for the Bengals for 2021. They've rotated through just this cast of characters, this Rolodex of names at slot corner every single season. Bring me Nate Hobbs to Pittsburgh. It's not going to prevent Pittsburgh from adding offensive talent and weapons and help. Not going to prevent Pittsburgh from adding an outside corner, but it's going to help shore up that slot spot that has been really just unfilled and not managed well for several seasons.
Yeah, look, I understand the dot connecting. I like it. Overall, he is coming off his rookie contract, right? Was he a proven performance escalator guy last?
I do not know.
Is that why his salary was like $3 million or something?
Probably, considering he was a 5th round pick. I don't know if that's going to be the base on that, but I do not know the escalators on anything. Looks like it. His salary in 23 was $940,000, so I'm going to guess he got a pay raise somewhere.
Let me see if I can find that real quick here.
Just a couple other quick things to mention as you look that up. Pittsburgh's familiar with him. The Raiders and Steelers have played all 4 years. Hobbs has been in the NFL. Hobbs has been productive. He's got 28 tackles, 3 pass breakups against them, and so he's just a familiar name. Mike Tomlin praised the heck out of Nate Hobbs 2 years ago before that Steelers-Raiders matchup, and that word got back to Hobbs, who then in turn praised Mike Tomlin for it. And while Pittsburgh has certainly underwhelmed in the playoff drought, yada, yada, Hobbs has gone 28-40 in 4 years with the Raiders. He's gone to the playoffs just once, had just one winning season. And so he's had 4 different head coaches, full-time and interim head coaches combined. And so going to Pittsburgh that will compete for a playoff spot, have stability, again, with Alexander now back in Pittsburgh, all signs and things you can really sell Nate Hobbs on to come to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it looks like he was a proven performance escalator bump in 2024. So that makes sense. The jump to the $3.4 million that he received from the Raiders last year. What was the 2021? That was COVID and all, though, wasn't it? Were they at that? What was he a visit? Was he a pre-draft visit guy? Was he pro day visit guy? Do you remember? Do we have the list?
No, yeah, I looked up a little bit at nothing that I came across that illustrated any clear pre-draft interest. He was on a big prospect coming out. He was a 5th-round guy out of Illinois. They probably had, they did their homework, but he played the Raiders. He played Hobbs for 4 straight years. He's made plays against you. I think they're pretty familiar with who this guy is now.
All right, I definitely see the dot connect, and he's a guy that, they certainly could have intentions on signing and not have to break the bank on.
Yep, I'd be all for it. Now, you could also suggest, and I mentioned this a couple weeks back, Mike Hilton, a reunion with him as a slot corner, but he is older. He's in his 30s, probably more expensive as well, based on what some of the projections are suggesting. So it could be Hilton. I'm tired of this team, Dave, going into each season, basically having zero idea what they're going to do at slot corner. In 21, it was, let's try Minkah Fitzpatrick there, and that didn't work. A couple of years, it's been some committees of rundown guys and pass down guys. Sullivan and Patrick Peterson, Millette and Cam Sutton the year before. Last year was literally whoever is healthy is going to play for us. Right. And it was Beanie Bishop, who made some plays, but he's a young guy that was in over his head, and then they pivoted to Cam Sutton, and that was a disaster. Not giving up on Beanie here, but give me Nate Hobbs over Beanie Bishop. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's better against the run. Bishop can be a backup, and Hobbs has had his injury issues, and so if he goes down, then you go ahead and put Bishop in there, and you're okay. So just makes sense on a lot of levels.
I imagine that post is doing pretty good this morning, huh? On Hobbs.
Yeah. And actually, people are happy. We have not had a lot of happy comments recently in the last month or so. And so that's gotten a lot of positive reception, and I will take it, and I appreciate it.
All right. Now we'll wait and see with the start of the new league year about 6 weeks away. So that's a good dart throw.
All right, Dave, anything else? If not, we can get through some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, are we missing anything here? The odds on the Steelers for the next Super Bowl are kind of a little bit scattered here, I think, overall. Let me see if I can pull up my annual kind of top 4 across the NFL for next year's Super Bowl. Let's see. FanDuel has the Steelers at 70-1 odds to win the next Super Bowl. DraftKings has them at 65-1, I believe. BetMGM has them at 80-1, and the Superbook here, Westgate in Las Vegas has them at 50-1. So the lowest that so the lowest that you're going to find is 50-1. So obviously it'll be interesting to. I like looking at these things right after the Super Bowl ends and then right after the draft ends to see how much they change, where the betting money, how the betting money shifts and all like that.
Sure. Long odds are Pittsburgh, similar to last year if you look back, but equally long. And if you look at most of these sports books, including the ones you mentioned, 3 of the top 4 teams, most likely and most favored, are in the AFC. Of course, the Eagles are the favorites, but then basically it's universally the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Bills. So that really just paints the picture of how tough the AFC is, where the top end teams are still residing in Pittsburgh's conference.
All right, let's get to a few emails here. Cordell Carter writes in, watching the Super Bowl, I, like many fans, feel slightly better this morning about the Steelers' chances to be more competitive sooner rather than later. It goes without saying that we have to have a hell of a draft and offseason shoring up depth, but it's not foolish to think that Justin Fields, assuming we resign him, of course, can't have at least as high of a ceiling as Hurts. What worries me the most about this team is coaching. We are They're unimaginative on both sides of the ball. Who is our biggest liability as a coach? He has in bolded letters here. He says, my vote goes to Artie Smith as an Atlanta-based Steelers fan. Seeing firsthand how he ran the Falcons into the ground, it's clear his Titans success was tied more to having Hall of Fame running back and elite wide receiver in Brown than anything he did. I can't out Nick Sirianni after that Super Bowl last night said, you know what makes you a good coach? Having great players. It makes it easy to be a great coach. Do you want to get into the biggest liability as a coach, or do you want to get into his optimism about Justin Fields saying if we resign him, it can at least have a high of a ceiling as Jalen Hurts?
I mean, maybe Fields could, but how close are you to that ceiling? The potential is still things you haven't done, and it's hard to predict or expect Fields to be the next Jalen Hurts and to have that kind of resurgence. I think Fields can get better. I think he has gotten better, but you're going to need also a lot of talent around. The Eagles won, and I don't want to take away from Hurts. He had a great season, and I thought was a catalyst in last night's game. But the Eagles had the best roster in football, and so that certainly helped kind of mitigate Hurts not being an elite top three caliber type of quarterback. In Pittsburgh, obviously far away from building the best roster in the NFL. Biggest liability, I don't know. I mean, I get the Arthur Smith, the conservative brand of football. I think with that, you could just point to maybe Tomlin and the more conservative nature of the team as a whole, philosophically, that has them a little more static, a little more stuck.
Agreed. Yeah, just rock fights. Yeah. Look, with Justin Fields, he had a career year, albeit just 6 games in adjusted net yards per passing attempt, 5.86. All right. And that was almost 0.6 high. He has at least progressed in that stat throughout his short NFL career, but you're going to have to lay out to me why anyone thinks that he can take another, let's say, 0.6, 0.7 jump and get a an adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat to 6.5 or greater. Because you're not going to win a Super Bowl unless you have a number like that. You just not. And even Patrick Mahomes couldn't do it. Yeah, I realize that they were 1 game away, but the fact of the matter is they did not win the Super Bowl. And Patrick Mahomes had an adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat under 6 for the regular season. So I understand optimism and then looking at what Jalen Hurts did and the mobility aspect and all, but I got to see it on the field. I got to see him make those 5 plays a game, other than using his legs in a passing game. I got to see him take fewer sacks. He's definitely a kid that you got to surround him with a better running game. Those kind of things there. And I'm just not there to thinking that Justin Fields, can even be close to talking about a ceiling close to Jalen Hurts.
Could a better roster help bridge that gap to get Fields to that Hurts number? If you gave Fields kind of weapons that Hurts is working with, will that just kind of not magically, but naturally bring up that number?
Can you get him to 6 with all that? Yes, but I mean, there's still the sacks. There's still pushing the football down the field with regularity. There's still those 5 throws a game that you're going to, you're still going to be reliant on the player, at some aspect. I think just merely surrounding him by a better offensive line, better offensive weapons will get him maybe to make another jump. But I mean, I'm going to have to see his actual play get him to that 6.5. There's still an aspect of his play, his own play, on a down by down, game by game basis that's got to get better, that I've got to see personally to think that he can get to that 6.5 or greater number.
Okay.
I'm just not. I gotta see. There's nothing that has led me to think that, okay, had he played more than 6 games in especially with the way the Steelers' philosophy, yada yada. That makes me think that this is a guy that can register a 6.7, 6.8, 6.9 number.
And even if you do that, you need your defense to have an elite
Right.
number as well to complement that in Pittsburgh, maybe getting further away from that target as they get older.
Right. Now, is he the guy that I think they will ultimately land on and see if they can do that? Yes. But I think I got to actually see him do it though. I mean, we got to see less sacks. I mean, we got to see this team focus more on using that mobility of his more. He's got to start making those 4 or 5 plays a game with his arm. And Hurts did that last night. He didn't have a lot of attempts, but there were some key throws in that game that he made.
Even the one to A.J. Brown that was wiped out by OPI, which was very questionable. It was a great throw by Jalen Hurts. I will say that Fields and Hurts' sack percentage rate was pretty similar. Hurts was at 9.5. I think Fields was right around there last year. So the sacks are certainly an issue that can weigh down that number, but it did not seem to impact Hurts too much. Fields was at 9.0 sack percentage.
Okay. But I mean, you still got those 5 or 6 plays a game that are differences in games.
For sure. And Hurts is making higher level throws down the field. And of course, just has more talent too when you have 2 receivers in Brown and Devonta Smith. And of course, you have Barkley, the offensive line, etc. That all helps as well.
Right.
All right. What else do we got, Dave? Anything else?
Yeah. Lost my train of thought there. Let's go back to Bill writes in, watching this game tonight, it is clear that the Steelers are who the Steelers are trying to be. For the Steelers to emulate that, the defense needs to improve. The O-line needs to improve. Need a running back and a wide receiver. All the holes we know about, he says. My question to you guys is about Fields. Watching Hurts win an MVP and lead that team, I couldn't help but think I'm watching what Fields could be. Hurts was very good, had some great throws, ran well, but did have a few bad throws too. I felt like I was watching what Fields could be, only with more dynamic running ability. In your respective opinions, am I crazy? He says. Love all the content. I think it just goes back to what all we just said. I think is Fields definitely a mobile guy that, look, I thought going into this season, we would see a 40, 50, 60-yard Fields touchdown. Some of those, something similar to what he did in Chicago a couple of times. Now, obviously, only had 6 games to do it, and it felt like the handcuffs were kind of on him a little bit. So first and foremost, I think you got to turn him loose and say, if if your legs have got to get you out of the problem, get out of the problem and do that. So I think that's the dynamic running ability needs to be taken advantage more of if that's going to be your guy. But then once again, I think it comes down to those key moments in games. We got to see him make those Jalen Hurts kind of throws in key moments in games, and I think that's what separates those two right now.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to be taking away from Jalen Hurts here when I talk about this answer, and I don't mean to do that. Hurts is fantastic and a great story and a great dude, and the whole defense was fantastic last night, but Hurts was easily deserving to be MVP. He rose to the occasion in the biggest moment, and hats off to him for that. But I don't want to lose our eye on the ball. The way the Eagles win is through the trenches. It's through the O-line, it's through the D-line, a great pass rush, a great offensive line, homegrown overall, from high level picks to guys they've molded like Mayata at left tackle, a rugby player turned into a franchise left tackle with that elite running game. And so, yes, there's a lot of focus on Fields and Hurts, and can you get Fields to become Hurts? But Hurts is partially Hurts because of the great roster building around them. And the Eagles have had smart, calculated free agent signings with guys like Zach Bond. What a pickup Zach Bond was. Wow. Of course, adding Saquon Barkley. And so they've been able to really build this roster in just the most masterful way, which is even more difficult to do in this modern era of free agency and salary cap, all that kind of stuff. It really is impressive. They drafted well, including this year with DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, their top 2 defensive backs. And so I don't want to have so much focus on Hurts. The focus really should start with the trenches. And if you do those things, then your quarterback naturally benefits from that. I just want to make that point clear.
Look, can Fields win games in Pittsburgh? Well, the short answer to that is he won 4.
Yeah, they were 4-2.
In this past season, in 6 games there. So the short answer is, can you win games with Justin Fields as your quarterback in Pittsburgh? Yes. But how much more can you win? Can you win a playoff game with him? And has that become the standard? Can it be all right? Let's throw a parade. Justin Fields went 10-7 in a season. Steelers won a wild card game. Get bounced after that. Hooray! What a great season.
Yeah, I get that.
Can you get to that? And is that what we're celebrating here?
No, again, I don't want to lower the standard, but it is the first step. It is this elusive milestone for Pittsburgh they have not reached. And if you want to win a Super Bowl, you got to win a playoff game first.
Right. I mean, can they do that with Hurts? I mean, with Fields?
Can they win a playoff game?
Yeah.
With the right roster around him, sure, but you better have a really good roster around him.
And it's got to start in the trenches.
Right. And that's why the offensive line is such a focal point this year because, again, they've invested. You don't have to invest more in terms of adding, but you have to develop these guys. They have to work out. You can't miss. You can't have to, start from scratch or only hit on Zach Frazier and you miss on the tackles and you're building the guards again. This offensive line is going to be the pivotal factor in an offseason where you're unlikely to find that quarterback of the future. Maybe some magical happens and you trade up for Cam Ward or whatever the case is, or maybe Fields becomes the guy. But the focus and the stepping stone the measuring stick you want to use in 25 is how much better does this offensive line get?
Right. I agree. And obviously the defensive line too. And we fully expect them to have some draft capital in that.
As they should.
All right, let's see if we can get one more in here from Mario. Right, saying, howdy, gents. We heard from Coach Tomlin that changes. Did we hit this coming, but nothing significant occurred with the coaching staff? Could the change be more philosophical for a defense so built on pressuring an offense? The staff seems to not value the most helpful part of that, which is creating panic on the other side by generating a lead. Nothing shrinks options quicker than seeing sevens go up against you. We never get up early 14-0 or 17-0 because we're busy running the ball. We've gotten fewer splash plays out of our expensive defense because we don't create enough situations for them to thrive. Obviously, we won't turn into Cincinnati, but could the change be that we finally try to get up early on teams and Tomlin doesn't want to give that away just yet? Well, look, I mean, what did Tomlin say coming out? We got to figure out a way to score more points, right? Even though they did have a bump in point production, overall when they got into the nitty gritty late in the season, that went away against those better teams there. This team, as we just stated at the early in the show, they had the takeaways this year. It was just on a down by down. Sacks were down overall. I think pressures probably were overall down overall, and then obviously this team wasn't great against the run when it really mattered. So, and then on the flip side, we got to get this streak out of the way of opening possession, offensive scores, and they've got to become more explosive on offense, even though they did a little bit better job of creating explosive plays up until that. This season can easily be divided into the first 2/3 and the final third, right?
Sure, it was the story of two, not halves, but what you said basically. Yeah, the 10-3 start and the 5-game collapse that ensued, including and ending with that wild card loss to the Ravens. To answer the question,
they won the games they were supposed to win. They just didn't win the games that people wondered if they could win.
The heavyweight fights, they got TKO'd or knocked out, even not even TKO, and yeah, they beat up on the teams you thought they could beat up against, the teams they were favored against. To answer the question philosophically, I guess time will tell. We'll just have to see. I mean, obviously, when you have a high end quarterback, philosophies I should say change. And I will say, I mean, like when Tomlin when you had the killer bees, Tomlin was a different kind of coach. He was led by the offense. The offense was aggressive. They pushed the ball. They put up points, and they went for 2-point conversions and pioneered that for a season. And so Tomlin's thought process is just, what is the strength of my team? I'm going to lean on that strength and going to try to minimize and mitigate the weakness. And so for Pittsburgh, the last 5 seasons since 2019 has been the defense is to strength. Let's lean on that and ride that to victory. And it has worked in the regular season. It obviously has not worked in the playoffs. That's kind of where the model stops when you're facing some of those potent offenses. Um, yeah, I had a thought and I lost it on the
I'll pick
philosophy.
up a thought I just had. There was the fact that even though they beat the teams that they were supposed to beat through the first 2/3 of the season, there, how many of those were we gripping there in the fourth quarter in typical Steeler fan fashion? There, the old "don't turn the football over." T.J. Watt will come to the rescue in the fourth quarter, make a big play. We'll get out of the stadium and back on the plane with a W, right? You can't win games with that philosophical approach.
And that was part of the motivation to switch away from Fields was, could this offense do more? Could Pittsburgh put up more points and win differently than they had been winning? And Wilson did that to begin. And then that obviously did not happen to end the season. The thought that I had was, I suppose the philosophical change I hope that happens, even assuming there's not going to be some magical franchise quarterback who appears in 2025, is Tomlin has to stop, and I've railed against this forever. He has to stop with the whole "we're not defined by our slow starts."
Right.
That mindset has to change. Even though I get what Tomlin says, and he has been proven right at times where Pittsburgh starts off slow, they fall behind, or it's just a 0-0 type of game, and then Pittsburgh wins in the fourth quarter, and that's how they get out of Dodge with a victory. That mindset's not going to get you to playoff wins, to Super Bowl contention. And to the reader's point, can you jump on teams? Can you throw them off their game? Can you get off to that hot start? I mean, Pittsburgh, what was the number? You said 21 or 3 touchdowns in the first quarter in 2024, 0 first possession touchdowns. That mindset has to change. There has to be a greater emphasis and urgency to quicker starts. What you preach is what you get. And if you preach, don't worry about the start, worry about the finish, you're always going to have slow starts. There has to be preaching about faster starts, and it has to really get executed in 2025. I hope that changes.
And here's the thing. It all starts in your division, and you've got Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow in there. You have how are you going to beat those teams on regular basis? You've got to make hay in your division first. If you can beat the Ravens and the Bengals in today's NFL right now, then you could probably hang with pretty much anybody because of the quarterback situation that both those teams have there. So you've got to figure out how you can because that's basically what you're going to have to do in these AFC North games against those two teams moving forward, right? You're going to have to, and it sounds silly to say, oh, yeah, of course you got to outscore them, but I mean, you got to outscore them. I mean, you can't expect to get into the games against the Ravens and the Bengals twice against each team every year and think you're going to hold those teams down to 17 points.
Agreed. Although, I mean, Pittsburgh has done well in the division, even though they've been outclassed a quarterback for a chunk of that time. But, you can't go through a whole playoff cycle and expect to consistently beat these top end quarterbacks and go on this crazy run being outmatched offensively and at quarterback time and time again. And what if Cleveland drafts a quarterback and they end up being the next great thing, the next Stroud, the next Jaden Daniels? What if that's Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders? Then Pittsburgh is going to have even a tougher path. Even the Browns are a mess, but if they find the quarterback, we know how quickly quarterbacks can turn around franchises, including Houston and Washington's fortunes. And so, Pittsburgh's not even in that position this year.
Look, 3-3 in the AFC North's not going to cut it.
Agreed, but I mean they've been at or above 500 in the division for every year since 2010. I mean, that is remarkable staying power. They have won against the division consistently, and I will give them credit for that.
Yeah, but how many playoff games have they won, right?
No, yeah, I'm not. It's a different talking point for sure. But I mean, I think in the division they have been competitive, but they're winning those divisional games in those rock fights. And the bottom line is, you just can't win rock fights in the playoffs. That's not sustainable. You might squeak out a wild card game against some lesser team that way. You're not going to do that time and time again. You're not going to go on a run winning 14-10.
Short answer for Mario is, yeah, we got to start seeing Steelers start jumping on teams early.
Yes, and that starts with Tomlin talking about starts differently. And I think he maybe began to do that late in the season, but that has to change. And maybe that changes how they practice. And, I mean, obviously everyone has a game plan. They want to score early. Nobody's planning to have slow starts, but there's got to be some sort of change in how they operate, and certainly in the way Tomlin talks about it, to get those different results.
All right, we got what do we got tonight? Got a live stream tonight?
Yes, live stream tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time on my YouTube channel. Dave and I will hang out, answer your questions. I'm sure talk about all the things we discussed today and probably some more. And then we'll be back on, probably going to do a Tuesday night show because Dave, I know you're going on a little trip later this week. And so we may record Tuesday night. We'll see what news there is and kind of play it by ear. And we'll be back for a Wednesday show either way.
All right, and what are we up to on draft profiles?
I'm not sure on the number, but we're probably 70 or something. So I watched the safety that's not gotten a lot of buzz. Malachi Moore from Alabama, viewed as a day 3 guy. I think his projection right now maybe 4th round or so, depending on who you ask and who you look at. I really like this tape. I think safety's a sneaky need for Pittsburgh. I talked about it before. Behind Minka, behind Elliott, there's nothing there. Casey, a free agent, Killebrew, a special teamer. And so if you can get Malachi Moore and say the 4th round, sign me up all day. I gave him a 2nd round grade, a high 2nd round grade. He had really good tape, versatile, good character. He had one outburst against Vanderbilt this year, but that aside, really high marks on him. He's productive. He's a good technician. He fills to run. He can play the pass. He can play slot. He can play deep path. He can play post safety. Might not test unbelievably well, but really good prospect.
All right, speaking of testing, we got the combine coming up at the end of the month, and hopefully, I think generally this is the week after the Super Bowls when they announce the all the 300 or whatever combine invites. So pay attention to SteelersDepot.com. As soon as we get that list, we'll turn it around and we'll link to their college profiles and bios and any profiles that we might have up on the site. So now that the 2025 season or 24 seasons officially come to the end, obviously full bore on draft talk and all like that. As Alex said, we'll have live stream on his YouTube channel tonight. We invite everybody to stop by and say hello and ask some questions if they feel so inclined. So with that, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. So until later tonight on the live stream, and if you wait for the podcast, that'll be released probably for Wednesday. I don't know, probably midnight, a little bit after if we record it Tuesday night. So as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.